This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and constructionbusinessaccelerator.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help small construction business owners maximize revenue and eliminate chaos. I've got a great, and I mean great, interview today with Leyah Valgardson. She's going to be a keynote speaker at the Women in Residential Construction Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, September 25th through the 27th. Go check that out. If you're a woman in residential construction, you really need to check this conference out. Just Google Women in Residential Construction Conference, and you'll find that. But it's September 25th. And here's what you're going to get out of this interview. You're going to learn, what does it mean to master your unique leader voice? What are the 4 different voice styles that we all have as leaders? What are some of the unintentional biases that we have? What is the difference between a mentor and a sponsor? We're going to talk about how you can boost your confidence. Leyah also breaks down the different types of energies. There are feminine energies and there are masculine energies, and what the differences are, and when is the right time that you may want to bring each of those. She talks about the ruts of response that we have. She gives some really great insight on improving customer experience. She spent years focused solely on customer experience. You're going to get a lot out of that. And then she'll tell you, where do you start if you want to put together a training program? Because she also spent a lot of time developing training programs for some of the biggest home builders in the country. So before I get into that interview, I've got a couple of things I want to get in front of you, a couple of valuable resources, a couple of things I don't want you to miss. If you need help managing the communication on your projects or with your crews, you need to check out Field Chat, which is the ultimate text messaging platform for construction sites. It eliminates what I call the Bermuda Triangle of information, where change orders and questions and reports between the office, the field, and the client disappear. That's why I call it the Bermuda Triangle. So what Field Chat will do for you is to organize all of your instant communications by project so that you have an organized record of all the communications by project that you can actually go back through and search. It also integrates nicely with some of the biggest project management software platforms out there, including PlanGrid and Procore. You could listen to me talk about Field Chat, but let me share some information that I got from a case study from, this is a quote from Bill Bentz, who is the president of the W.A. Bentz Construction Company. They do high-end work in Fort Lauderdale. Here's what he said about Field Chat. He said, Field Chat and our project management software work as a bridge between the guy physically working in the field and, in my case, the business owner, to get rid of all the stuff in the middle. Listen to this. Everyone knows what they need to do to get the job done. A brief summary of their results of using Field Chat. 75% of issues are addressed in advance with their project management software and Field Chat to ensure the job gets done right the first time. And then the implementation was really fast. They were up and running in less than a week, not months. And they were also able to eliminate 2/3 of their disparate systems by using Field Chat and their project management software, which in this case happened to be Procore. So if you want to check it out, here's some good news. You, as the Construction Leading Edge listener, could get 15% off. You can get 15% off. And hey, it might even be free based on the size of your operation. So you need to go to fieldchat.com/edge, sign up for a trial, sign up for an account. It might be free, but it's definitely going to be at least 15% off for you as the Construction Leading Edge listener. So go check it out. Field Chat. Let me try that again. fieldchat.com/edge. The other thing I want to tell you about is I am rolling out a new program that is designed to help with one of the most common challenges and one of the most common bits of feedback I get from construction business owners who say things like, I need accountability. Sometimes I need a boss. I had one guy even ask me, Todd, will you yell at me? People need accountability. If you want to get strategic stuff done, it really helps to have accountability. So imagine this. What if you were part of a group and you were on a call every month with this group of other construction business owners, and in that call, you would be able to share your wins with other people. You would be able to share your challenges, get feedback from the other folks in the group who have probably dealt with or are dealing with exactly what you're looking to get help with. And then you would have the accountability baked in because you're going to be on a call every month that will force you to do what you know you need to do. Have you ever said that or thought that? I know what I need to do, but I just don't seem to do it. Well, I am rolling out a peer group program that will put you in a group with no more than 4 other construction business owners. And I'll put you in a group where there's not a competitor. I'll hand select a group for you that is the best for you. You'll have a monthly call with that group. I will personally lead those calls. That's why there's just a handful of peer groups that I'll be leading. And if you are interested in being part of a peer group, if you want to find out more and you want to apply for a peer group, then here's what I want you to do. This is really simple. Send me a text message, 859-667-2015 with the word group in it, and I'll get back to you with all the details. So if you're interested in getting accountability, getting the kick in the butt you need, getting to be part of a group of other like-minded construction pros like yourself, business owner pros, then this peer group might be exactly the thing that you need. So send me a text message, 859-667-2015, to apply to be part of a peer group. All you have to do is send a text to that number with the word group in it. And if you're also interested in being part of a group, and listen, 1 call a month is great, but what if you could spend 2 days with a group of other construction business owners to get away from your business? Maybe it's the dumpster fire that is your business, so that you can get ahead with your business. If you want to get training, operate strategically, really dig into where is your business going? How do you sell on value? How do we put systems in place so we can take our business to where we want to be? Then you should check out the Advance. It's a live 2-day event that's coming up very soon, October 17th and 18th, 2019. It's in beautiful Lexington, Kentucky. It's on the Bourbon Trail, close to Keeneland Horse Racing Track, where we might or might not spend some time after the event's over. But tickets are selling out quickly. Prices are going up soon. Go check it out. If you're a construction business owner and you want to get ahead with your business and you want to be part of a community of other like-minded construction business owners, go to constructionbusinessaccelerator.com/advance, ADVANCE, or send me a text, 859-667-2015. Put the word advance in there. I'll get the information to you because, hey, I'm here to help you, right? I understand you're driving, you're working out, whatever. You may not be able to pull up a website. Just send a text. If you have any questions, send a text to that number, 859-667-2015, and I'll help you out. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this fantastic interview with Leyah Valgardson. All right, Leyah, thank you so much for being on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Excellent. So here we are recording the Friday before Labor Day weekend. It should be a relatively relaxed conversation. Let's hope if we've both done our work this week. So you are going to be speaking at the Women in Residential Construction Conference. We're recording this in 2019. So the Women in Residential Construction Conference is coming up September 25th through the 27th in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I believe I saw an email from the conference organizers, which led me to your website, which led me to think, I need to get Leyah on my podcast. So can you answer one question about the Women in Residential Construction Conference? The name is pretty straightforward, but who should take a look at that? Who would get the most benefit out of this type of conference, in your opinion?
As you said, Todd, I think the title is pretty clear on that. But if there are any women who work in the residential construction industry, this would be a fantastic conference for them to attend. I have not personally attended it yet. I'm very excited to do so this year. But from what I have heard of the different events that this group puts on, this one is the most, not necessarily the most attended, but definitely the most involved group of all of the groups of all of the events that that are put on. The women here are very great at collaborating and networking and just getting to know one another as partners within the industry. So it becomes a really great venue for that. as well as for women to help them learn, to help them to know how to rise in their career, specifically in a very male-dominated industry. So it becomes a platform that's very unique in that particular sense.
Yeah. I've learned that these sort of events are incredibly valuable, not just because of the content that you can pick up, but there's a lot of value in community and relationships. I've had a couple of events that I've hosted, and frankly, I thought that the content that I brought to the table would be the best part, but it was probably second or third in the list of what was most valuable. The most valuable being just being in a room with other people. There's this energy that you get from being around other people. It's inspiring to see people succeed. It's also really encouraging to people to know that they're not the only one dealing with things. So if you're thinking about going to a conference, just go. And if you're interested in mine, I'll talk about it toward the end of the podcast. But yeah, definitely. Women in Residential Construction, just Google it. It's September 25th, starts September 25th in Scottsdale, Arizona. And Leyah is going to be one of the keynote speakers. So we're going to talk about a variety of things. We'll talk about your background in construction, how you transitioned out of the corporate world into what you're doing currently. We'll talk about what that is, and some of we'll knock off some misconceptions and myths, which is one of my favorite things to tackle. But let's start with this. What does it mean to, quote, master your unique leader voice?
Excellent question, Todd. And I know you pulled that directly from my website. So that's what I do. I help women to master their unique leader voice, to help them rise in their career. Voice, I believe, is an extremely powerful thing, especially when it comes to our leadership. Leadership is also an interesting thing because it's personal leadership as well as leading those around us. And leadership is really what's going to help us to rise in our career, to get that promotion and to get that raise. Now for women, men and women alike, actually, I believe voice is extremely important in that leadership. Can you think of a single leader who did not use their voice?
No.
Silence, right?
Right.
It doesn't exist. We need to use our voices to lead and to lead well. And I believe voice will define you and it becomes your brand. And so helping women to master what that voice is and to know how to use it and when to use it in the right way is really important. And that's a lot of what I do with my coaching. We are constantly evaluating whether or not we should speak up or speak out. We are weighing the risks and the benefits. We're using this worth it equation. Is it going to be worth it? Is the ROI going to be worth it if I speak up and if I use my voice? So that's something all of us do, but women in particular, I find it seems really difficult for us because we have what we call this ideal woman, and I'm using air quotes. Each of us has this, and men, you may have this as well, but I know for sure women do. It's this voice in our heads that tell us that we are not doing things the right way, or that we need to be more of this or less than that, or we need to show up in the perfect amount, the perfect time, the perfect place. Like, it's basically this unachievable bar that we simply cannot even achieve. And yet she is constantly there telling us that we're not doing something right, or that we're saying the wrong thing, or your opinion doesn't matter, or what you have to say isn't right, or that solution isn't going to be worth it. And so that often will keep women from speaking up, simply opening their mouth. So that's the first thing, is trying to kind of shut her down because there is great value in having diversity of opinions, diversity of answers, diversity of solutions. It's so important, especially in a workplace and especially in an environment where it's heavily dominated by one sex or one type of nationality or belief system, whatever the case may be. There's really great value in having that diversity. And so even if our opinion may not be in line with the audience that's there, even if our solution to a problem may not be the correct solution, or the answer might be wrong, there's great value in us speaking up because our voices do matter, and it helps to open eyes and to open opinions and to open minds to something different than maybe they considered previously. So that's kind of the first part of speaking up. Just simply using your voice is going to create great benefits for those around us. There was also a study done that found that those who simply spoke up and used their voices were seen as more competent, socially skilled, and leader-like. Voice is linked to elevated status and is critical to emerge as a leader. So if we as women are hoping to rise in our careers, voice is critical to that. Here at Leader's Voice, I've identified 4 different voice styles that are unique to women. These may be in line with men as well, but because I work with women, I primarily know what they are for us. And these 4 different voice styles, it's really, the reason I mention this is it helps women to understand how they naturally speak. And you may find yourself in a couple of these different buckets, but there's probably one that you feel most natural in. And being authentic in your leadership and in your voice is really important as well. So those 4 different voice styles are kind, progressive, intellectual, and passionate. And to give you a really brief overview, more of this information actually will be up on my website soon. It is not there yet, but it will be soon. And of course, I'd be happy to chat with anyone offline if they'd like to learn more. But a kind voice is a very empathetic voice. This is the voice that's incredibly interested in people and in engaging and connecting with others. Now, one thing I will mention, I probably should have said this earlier, is with all of the benefit and the light of these different voices, they also have a shadow. And so it's understanding what that shadow is as well, so we can kind of shed light on it and learn how to work through the shadows of this voice. So going back to a kind voice, I kind of mentioned what it is. An example of a strong female leader with this type of voice would be Mother Teresa. The second voice is a progressive voice. This voice is very innovative. It's very imaginative. It's the big picture idea, right? It's these people that are coming in with all of these grand, wonderful things that are creative and inspiring. And an example of a voice like this would be Sarah Blakely. For those of you who aren't familiar, she is the founder of Spanx. So a very big inventor and very innovative. The third voice is an intellectual voice. This voice is very focused on the numbers and the data, the black and white, the statistics. This voice is definitely all about, it's an intellectual voice. And an example of this type of voice would be like a Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And then finally, there's the passionate voice. These voices are the ones that we all know them, right? The moment they speak, everybody just kind of listens because they get this fire burning up in people. They draw a crowd, they draw followers. Everything that they say and the ways that they do it, it is very passionate and it invokes action from people. An example of this would be Oprah or maybe Michelle Obama. So understanding what those different voice styles are will help us to be authentic in our voices. And then also understanding when it's appropriate to use what is very unique and very natural for us and in what setting. So an example of that would be if I am naturally a kind voice and yet I'm going into a meeting with a CEO, I still want to be authentic to that voice, but I'm maybe going to put on that intellectual hat for a few minutes. I'm just going to get in and be very kind in the way that I speak, but I'm going to share that data. I'm going to share the statistics. I'm going to share the numbers really quickly and then move on, right? And that will help me to show up as a much more competent leader, and simply by the way that I used my voice and how I used my voice. So a lot of stuff there, Todd, but voice is incredibly powerful.
Definitely. A couple of questions. Is this voice, is it something that needs to be uncovered, or is it something that needs to be manufactured? Like, in other words, do we all have our natural voice that we tend toward?
That's a really great question. I believe we have something that is naturally ours. It's what we tend toward. It's just how we naturally speak without really thinking about it. And if you consider the people in your workspace or your friends, you can probably quickly pick out and be like, oh, I know someone who's that kind voice or someone who's that intellectual or passionate voice. It's just what naturally comes to them. But where maybe the manufactured or the learned part comes in is learning how to use a little bit more of a different voice that isn't so natural to you. We all have varying degrees of each of these different voices. It's just what is, if we're not even thinking about it, the way that we speak is what is our most authentic voice. And yet, like I said, using that kind versus intellectual voice, we can learn a little bit more how to use a different type of voice depending on the audience. So maybe let's flip that in reverse. If we're typically a very intellectual voice and we're very based on numbers and statistics, and yet we're leading a team of people, we need to be very focused on the human-to-human connection. And sometimes that kind voice is a really great way to go about that, especially in establishing trust.
Yeah, my gears are turning here a little bit. That personally, I'm probably somewhere in the intellectual and progressive part, but I've figured out that at times I need to be intentionally empathetic, or go out of my way and be kind, or dig deep and be more passionate, do more inspiration rather than just provide data. So yeah, it's sort of like you're not really an introvert or an extrovert. You really want to be an ambivert, and you want to be able to choose which personality style best suits the situation and the people you're talking to. So if somebody's getting started with this and thinking, this is amazing, but how do I figure out which voice I need to use in which situation? What advice would you give them there?
That's another really great question, Todd. I'm actually going to be on my website very soon. I'll have a voice style quiz. This can help you to identify where you land in those 4 different voice styles, to quickly identify what is your authentic voice. And then from there, you can always, of course, speak to people who have that particular voice style and learn from people. I think that's a huge benefit of the human-to-human connection, is each of us have something we can offer to another. But then, of course, shameless plug, this is what I do. I help coach women. I help them to find that voice and to master that voice. And so if that's something that is of great interest to you, please reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you a little more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, very powerful stuff. It's one of these principles that once you expose it, you realize, oh, wow, it's been there all along. And you can look at all the problems and the issues that have been caused by the lack of recognition of the voice. Like I realized probably 10 years ago, 15 years into my career, I realized, you know what? Not everybody communicates like Todd does. And when Todd is frustrated by somebody who communicates in this, like for me, if I ask a yes or no question, like I'm looking for a yes or no right off the bat. And there were people I've worked with that would start off giving me all this background data and everything they were thinking about, and it kind of drove me crazy. And then I realized, well, my style of communication probably drives them crazy too. Which
I love that you mentioned that, Todd, because that happens quite often, I believe, and I think it comes from these particular different ways that we communicate.
Yeah, and it's not like there's not a right style of communication. I think the best communication style is the one that helps you connect with the other person. It's whichever one is right for them. And good leaders that I've worked with are the ones who they have the emotional intelligence and they can read, okay, this person processes information like this, and this is how I need to get to them. So it's instead of banging your head against the wall and saying, why can't they be more numbers oriented or black and white? Why can't you try to find where they are and meet them where they're at? So good stuff. Okay, let's talk about some mistakes. And we'll start with this. What are some of the most common mistakes that men make when working with women, whether they are reporting to a woman or they are managing women, or for that matter, working with women? But in general, what are the most common mistakes that you've seen that men make when they're working with women? Help us, please. We need help.
That's such a great question. And the show is Emotional Intelligence for the men who are concerned about this. I would say the very first thing is unintentional biases. So many times in my career, things have happened, interactions with men have happened that I know were not intentional. I know they were not trying to be offensive or to assume that simply because I was the woman, I was the one meant to do something or a certain task. So here are some examples of what happens to women often. This is not exclusive. This is not just a Leyah show. This is not just a one-off type of a thing. This happens quite often to women. We're asked to take the notes in meetings. We are asked to plan the parties. We're asked to order the lunch, or just assume that we'll be the ones to bring that in and set it up and clean it up, things like that. We're asked to make the copies or the coffee. Possibly we're being excluded from discussions and meetings. There's a lot of things that are proactively happen, and then a lot of things that are not happening. So these are things that are happening to women often. And in fact, I just gave a keynote speech on Wednesday to a tech company at a women's conference. And as I was kind of speaking through some of the things happening or that do happen to women, I saw a lot of nodding happening in the audience. And as I have one-off conversations with women, they also experience this. And yet the reason why I say unintentional biases, I don't think most humans on this planet are intending to ever be offensive or to be unkind to another human. Most of us are not intending that. I'll give an example. My most recent position before I did leave and start my own company, I was the director of training and development for a home builder. And on my team, there were 4 individuals. I was the only woman. 2 others, the 3 of us had a director title, and one of them was a VP, so he was the boss of all of us. And yet every time we go into a meeting with the 4 of us, they would turn and be like, Leyah, you got the notes? And for the first couple of times, I was like, okay, sure, whatever. But then it started to bother me. And thankfully, I had such great rapport with these gentlemen, and I respect them highly, and I know they respect me, that I finally said something, and I said, are you guys asking me to take these notes because I'm the only girl in the office or the only girl in this meeting? And every one of them was like this look of shock on their face, like, no, not at all. You're just so great and organized. And that was not at all their intent. And yet I think I opened their eyes to something in that moment where I was able to kind of teach them and to coach them. Because from where I was sitting, that's what it felt like. And that's what it feels like to a lot of women. So even if these things that are often not intentionally we're asked to do, it might be because we are actually really good at them. But maybe consider that it should be shared. Maybe consider that the way that you're approaching that might be taken in a different way than what you're actually meaning it to be. And maybe a really great way to look at that is, do you ask the men to do that task as equally as you do the women? Or do you assume that a man can do that as well as a woman? And on the vice versa, right? And if the answer is something that you're like, oh, wow, okay, then you have that awareness. And awareness is always the first step to change.
Yeah, I call that sort of self-awareness hugging the porcupine, because the closer you get, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Yeah, it's not fun.
Absolutely. There's a couple of other things. So I think unintentional biases are maybe some of the mistakes that men make and just not being aware. Some of the ways that they could be more proactive in including women and in helping them to rise. There's a couple of different things that come to mind, and that is, first of all, being very proactive in mentoring and sponsoring women. As we know, mentors and sponsors are key to helping us rise in our career, right? Mentors are there to help us be really great at the job that we're doing, and sponsors are there to pave the way and to help move us forward in our career. They're basically advocating for us. Now, statistically, women do not have nearly as many opportunities for mentors and sponsors as men do. There's a couple of reasons for that. And the very basic one is that there just aren't enough women in higher positions at this point to be able to mentor the women who are rising in the ranks. And so that is one of the places where men, especially those in leadership positions, can really take a look and see, who can I mentor? Who can I sponsor? And yeah, so that gives us a great opportunity to help women to rise, especially if we are in those higher positions. And this, again, this is one of those things for women to also take a look and see how we can mentor and sponsor. And then finally, being an ally for women. So if we're in a meeting and a woman speaks up and says something and it's a great idea, back her up. Almost be like that echo and be like, hey, so-and-so, I really liked what you said about this. If someone tries to talk over what they say or to take that idea, then you can be like, hey, didn't Susie just say that? So those little things like that, where men can be really great advocates for women, that's a great opportunity to help women rise.
Yeah, good stuff. So now let's turn the tables, and I'll ask this question. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see women in leadership making?
Love that question as well, because this is not a singular issue, right? Women need to do their part to rise, and men need to do their part. And I truly believe that when we can come together synergistically, we will all rise. But that first step is looking inward to see what we can do individually. So the very first thing that I would say is, instead of being defensive to some of these things that happen, use them as a coaching opportunity. If something happens that is potentially could be viewed as kind of prickly, or your spidey senses go up and you're like, I don't think I liked that very much like the example that I gave, that's an opportunity for you to speak up and to say something, but do so with empathy and with generosity and in a nurturing, kind way. So I think that's the very first thing, is not to get so easily offended, and then to actually address it and ask, hey, this is how I interpreted that. I'm assuming that's not what you meant. Can you help me understand? And that gives us an opportunity to help coach and to teach others. And then additionally, I think it's really important for women to be very authentic to what is naturally ours. It's pretty common for women coming into the workplace, which is a very masculine environment. It has a lot of masculine energy. For us to feel like we maybe have to play the game that same way, that we need to show up in our masculine energy and in this masculine way. But I truly believe that women owning who they are authentically and showing up in their femininity are going to help move us forward in a much greater way, because it's what's authentic to us, right? And I also believe that's what's going to help build our confidence, which also seems to be a challenge for a lot of women. Now, when I'm saying that, for those who aren't familiar, there are masculine and feminine energies within the world, right? And we actually have those within ourselves too. So when I say that work is a very masculine environment, it's because jobs and companies and work, we're getting stuff done, right? We have tasks, we have deadlines, we have goals that we need to meet and reach, we have budgets. That's all very masculine driven, and that's a very masculine energy. And yet the feminine energy is the energy that is creative and nurturing and connected. If we can bring both of those two together in a workplace with that synergy, both on the outside, bringing men and women together, as well as internally, figuring out how to balance those two different energies, think of how much more powerful we will be in our teams and within ourselves and our productivity and getting things done and getting them done really well.
Let me ask.
Excuse me. So
there's a lot of questions here.
Please.
I want to drill down into, what does it look like for I'll just be specific. What does it look like for a woman business owner to bring her femininity to her work? How does that show up?
That is a really great question. And I also want to clarify once again that men or women, we have masculine and feminine within us, right? Mm-hmm. But for a female business owner, that very specific example, for her to bring her femininity into the workplace, it's her being very connected with others, being compassionate, allowing for things, being creative and nurturing and intuitive. Those are some of our superpowers as women, and it's what makes us. It's our strength, really. It's our superpower and it's our strength. So if I am a business owner as a woman and I'm running a company, I have things I got to get done, right? I don't have much of a company if I don't. So I'm very much working and operating into my masculine power. But let's say I have a project that I need to get done and I have a team of people that I'm leading. If I were to use that masculine energy of getting things done and balancing my budgets and making sure I'm on point and on deadline and getting things to where they need to be done. So that masculine energy is there, it has to be. But let's say I show up with my feminine energy of connecting, of empathy, of creativity. So what if I connect with every person on that team first on an individual basis? And what if I use empathy to find out what they would most like to do and to work on in this project so that they can show up as their best selves? And finally, what if I create an environment of creativity to where people are showing up in really creative ways of how they can enhance and approach this project? Don't you think that would be a much better approach to getting something done versus just this go, 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 push, 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 do, do, do? I think that is a really powerful way that women can show up using some of our greatest strengths in our femininity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned confidence. I have clients who are women business owners, and most of them struggle with confidence. Where does that come from? And then what can they do to build their confidence?
That is absolutely 100% accurate. I have found with the clients that I work with, confidence seems to be kind of at the base of a lot of the struggles that women have in rising in their careers. It goes back to that ideal woman, right? She's constantly telling us that what we're doing isn't good enough. And then for whatever reason, women are often comparing externally. I know this is not exclusive to women either, but for whatever reason, we're really, really hard on ourselves with the external comparisons and even the internal comparisons. So it's very, natural is not quite the right word, instinctive, that's the better word. It's more instinctive, I believe, for women to fall victim or fall to this trap, if you will, of constantly comparing to ourselves in that ideal woman, which is probably the harshest critic of all, as well as comparing ourselves to others and wondering whether or not we are actually capable of doing this. And of course, there's the whole imposter syndrome, right? Now, I believe that really tackling that confidence first and foremost, and this is often what I do when I coach my clients, is we work on overcoming fears and reframing belief systems that just simply aren't serving us. And though that doesn't seem to have a direct correlation to helping a woman enhance her leadership and find her voice, it 100% does, because when we can really build that confidence, then I can build with her from a strong foundation. And we're one person, whether we're at home, at work, at play, we're all one person. And so where we're enhancing one area of our life, we're going to be enhancing all areas of our life. So building that confidence is always the very first step in helping a woman to continue to rise in her career.
Yeah, you mentioned imposter syndrome. I talk about this a lot. I've heard about it a lot actually this week. How would you define imposter syndrome? What does that look like?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's been scientifically proven that that's a real thing, right? So it's this struggle where we think we don't match up to everyone else around us, or that we think that someone is going to finally figure out that we're a fake,
right? Yeah.
That we've somehow risen up this ladder and we've done all this work and we truly have earned it. But we get to this spot and we're like, somebody's going to figure it out. I wish I had the quotes in front of me right now, but Maya Angelou, who you may or may not be familiar with, but she's written multiple books, I think like 12 different books. And she was quoted saying something like, every single time I release a new book, I think, they're going to find me out now. A brilliant artist and a brilliant writer. And yet every single time she thought, they're going to figure me out. And even Einstein, I really wish I had this quote in front of me, but he says a very similar quote as well, where he kind of doubts his intelligence. And once again, one of the brightest minds of all history. And he's wondering if people are going to figure him out as well.
Yeah.
So it's something that is not unusual. I think it crosses all boundaries, whether or not you're a man or a woman. But some of the ways to really combat that, I think, is to really work on your confidence, number one, and then to talk to people, because I think what happens is we're so stuck in our minds that we think we're the only ones who think that. Everybody else has got their confidence built up. Everyone else is performing so well, and everyone else is just kicking ass, and here I am struggling. That's not the case. And if we can find those strong mentors and those people who are safe, it allows us to have those conversations that can sometimes be hard, but yet really soothing, if you will.
Yeah, such good advice. Another great reason to go to a conference like the Women in Residential Construction is to go get around other people and find out that you're not the only one and connect with them.
Absolutely.
And a couple of thoughts on that, because I've had a similar experience. So many people come to me with these external problems like cash flow and growing their company and all sorts of external problems. And really the root cause is their mindset. It's either a lack of confidence. The way this shows up with a lot of contractors is they don't have confidence in their pricing. They don't have confidence in the value that they offer. So when they estimate a project, they total it up, they get to the bottom, they look at that number, and their immediate thought is, it's too much. They'll never pay that. I could never charge that much. So what do? They start to cut the cost and or delay submitting the estimates. They put themselves in a bad spot. They do get the project. They've cut their cost to the bone. Now they're scared, and it sets off this downward spiral that could all be prevented by just recognizing, okay, that's fear talking, when that was fear that said that they'll never pay for that. And here's my theory. This could be the ranting of a madman, but here's my theory, is that we have this inner critic, this voice in our head that's trying to protect us from the deep primal fears that we have, which are death, rejection, criticism. I mean, think about, people are deathly afraid of public speaking. And it's because of, it's not, hopefully not because of the fear of death or mutilation, but it's this fear of criticism or rejection. And this inner critic is trying to protect us, saying, like, Todd, don't do that. Don't put that thought out there. Don't make that LinkedIn post. Don't share that, because people will think you're stupid, and that's going to hurt. And we have to fight through that inner critic, because that inner critic's trying to protect us from the exact thing that we need to be doing. And that's why I tell people that you need to go directly at resistance and do exactly what the inner critic is telling you not to do, because it's like a compass. It's trying to protect you from failing at the exact thing that you should be doing, that you are really afraid that you're going to try and fail.
Yeah, I love everything that you're saying about that, Todd, and I have a couple of thoughts. First is, I'm going to give you guys a super crash course in neuroscience. So you talked a little bit about that fear and how that critic is meant to protect us, right? And ultimately, that's our brain. Our brains are meant to protect us. And the amygdala, that's the fight, flight, or freeze part of our brain, that is 100% fully formed the day that we are born. And yet the logical part of our brain, can you guess when that forms?
I'm still not sure that mine has formed, but it takes a while.
It takes a while. It does not fully form until we are 24 years old. So if you think about that, we are responding very emotionally to a lot of situations that feel like we're going to die. It's a fight, flight, or freeze response, right? And we're automatically shifting into that really quickly because our amygdala is fully formed, and it's meant to be there, fully formed, to keep us alive. And yet our logical brain, up until we're 24, is not fully functioning. And so we are creating these ruts, if you will, of response in our lives to these situations that are emotionally charged, that feel like a threat in one way or another. And so our brain, again, it's meant to protect us, and it's also kind of lazy. So once we get into that rut, it doesn't want to shift out of it. And if you think about, those of you who know what I'm talking about with a rut, they can get really deep, and it's super hard to find a new track in a muddy, dirty dirt road, right? It's really hard to shift that. So there's that first thing there where it's just not easy. And the second thing is our brain is processing millions of bits of information every second. Obviously, we cannot process all of that. So our brain is also a really effective gatekeeper. And once we decide that something is what it is, our brain will only show us evidence of that. And what that looks like in a very practical way, I recently bought a truck a few months ago. I bought an F-150, and when I was leading up to buying that truck, I'm not kidding, all I saw on the road were a bunch of F-150s, right? Now, it's not because there was this massive influx of new F-150s on the road. It's because my brain started to filter all the other cars, because all I wanted to see were F-150s at that time. It's a very similar thing that happens to us in these moments of emotionally charged situations and scenarios. If we have been telling ourselves for so long that I can't do this, or I'm an imposter, or no one's going to value me, or whatever the case may be, we all have our own little demons, right? If we are continually saying that, our brain will start to filter out anything that does not prove what we're asking it to prove. So I say that for two reasons. It's really important for us to be aware of that so we can then make a different choice. And I know every single person listening to this knows what it feels like to be an adult and feel like you're responding as like a little 2-year-old tantrum internally, right? Hopefully not externally. Hopefully you're not down on the ground pounding the floor as an adult in a meeting.
I've seen some behavior that's pretty close to that, but
pretty close.
Yeah.
But that is what's happening. That's what's happening. And so it's important for us to be aware of those things, so we can choose a different pathway. We can choose a different response. And a lot of those are those fears and those belief systems that we built up for so long. And it will take a little bit of time, and it's going to take some practice. And even once you do it very regularly and start to shift to where you have this new rut that's a much better one, our brains are also lazy. So they're going to want to go back to that pathway that's very normal and natural for us. So it's not hopeless by any means. This is how people learn and grow and become better every single day. But it is really enlightening to be aware of what's going on neurologically, so you don't think you're crazy when some of these situations happen and you respond very emotionally. It just gives us a better opportunity to choose something better.
Absolutely. And I would say that some of the best leaders and most successful people in business are not necessarily the most intelligent or have the highest IQ. The people that have been most successful, in my opinion, are the ones who have done this porcupine wrestling, and they've faced their demons and they realize, okay, this is my default state. I get really freaked out whenever I have to go to the bank, or I get really freaked out when a client calls because I've had so many bad interactions with clients, but I need to change that default state. This is a good thing. Take control of the narrative. And I am absolutely convinced this is an absolute game changer. And frankly, if you're listening to this and you are looking for a strategy or a piece of software or a tool, or you're hoping to hire a person and think they're going to solve all your problems, you really need to look inside and take Leyah's advice. Go look at your brain. Go get control of your thoughts and emotions, because if you don't, then you will run off good people. No strategy will stick, and software's not going to help. It's most of the game is won or lost inside. So let's back out of that rabbit hole, because I could stay in the neuroscience mindset rabbit hole. But let's talk about your experience. You spent quite a few years in the construction industry, and tell us a little bit about what you did there, and then we'll take off from that point.
Absolutely. So yes, you're right, Todd. I did spend most of my corporate career was working for national home builders, big national builders. But I actually have been in home building my whole life. My dad's a general contractor, and I remember as a very young child being on job sites, picking up trash, hammering nails, pulling electric wire. And then as I got older, he didn't back off. I got to do everything. So I laid, foundation forms, I framed houses. I've gotten really good at roofing houses. So I've been around it really my whole career. But in my corporate career, I started with Pulte Homes in Las Vegas, which was a fantastic kickoff to a career. That is such an excellent company, and they have an incredible training program. I hope they still do to this day, because I know when I went through it, it was very comprehensive and incredibly powerful to build great leaders. But I started as a customer relations manager. So I was in charge of the customer experience for one new home community, and continued to grow. The majority of my career, I was just rising in the ranks of the customer satisfaction experience. That's really what I did for a lot of my career, but was very involved and interested in training and helping people to become better people and better leaders. And then my most recent position, I was the National Director of Training and Development for a builder, which I loved, because helping, like I said, I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about creating great leaders and great managers and just great people. And so that was really the segue into what I do now, which I can chat about a little bit later. But that's what I've done in most of my career. So I've had a lot of experience doing hands-on work and being out there on the job site, working out of a job shack and in the trailer. I know what it's like to communicate with homeowners. I know what it's like to communicate with trade partners and my superintendents, my teammates. So kind of seen it all along every spectrum. And then, of course, up into the boardroom and being part of the leadership team for companies as well.
Yeah, what a varied experience. I wanted to, speaking of experience, customer experience is often overlooked, especially in construction. People are like, it's all about scope, schedule, budget, finished product. How important is the customer experience, and if somebody said, Leyah, what's the number one thing I can do to improve the customer experience? How would you answer that question?
Oh my goodness, Todd, I'm almost as passionate about the customer experience as I am about people being better people. It's what I lived and breathed for so many years. If we don't take care of our customers, we do not have customers. I recognize that in construction, a lot of it is location and price. So you may always have someone to purchase your home, but your reputation means a lot. And people are getting very, very, they're much more cognizant these days about reputations of companies, especially with the largest purchase someone will ever make in their life. So I believe it's very, very important for us as home builders to have a great customer experience. And one of the best ways I think we can do that is great communication and follow-up. And that has two different ways to do that. It's great communication and follow-up internally, because there's a lot of people wearing a lot of hats who are all involved in one person's experience, right? So if there's not a seamless way to communicate across those teams and across those departments and across all these different people, the customer experience will fail. And then the second part is being very proactive in your communication with your customer. If they ask you a question, you respond, and you respond quickly. If you don't know the answer, you say, well, I'll have this to you in 24 hours. You always want to be really aggressive in your follow-up. Aggressive is not the right word. I'm sorry, proactive. Very proactive in your follow-up, and do so quickly and effectively. And if you cannot say yes to them, explain to them why. And be sure, this is where it goes back to making sure the communication internally is really good, because I kind of liken this to a child going to whichever parent they possibly can to get what they want. Mm-hmm. Homeowners will do that. Mm-hmm. Customers will do that, right? So if they're going to talk to the salesperson on the job site and ask them for something, and the salesperson knows that's not what we do here, and they say no, well, then the next time they see the superintendent drive up, they're going to say, hey, Mr. Bob the Builder, I really need this, and the salesperson said I could have it. So, and then Bob the Builder's like, okay, cool, let's throw it in. If there's not that clear communication on the internal, where everyone knows exactly what your processes and procedures are, what you will and will not allow, you're going to have a lot of these problems happen, because your homeowners are going to want what they want. And if it's just what you don't do, and they know that up front, and they're not going to challenge you on it, but it's when they can find those loopholes and those weak spots where they'll work it. They'll work the system. And you guys know what I'm talking about, those of you out there who work with homeowners. And it's not that they're bad people, but this is, again, a big investment in their lives, and they want what they want. And it's hard to say no sometimes, but if it's going to create a better experience for the customer in the long run, because you are going to have things streamlined and create a really good quality on-time delivery, then that's your answer. And you need to be sure everybody knows what it is, so it's the consistent communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's probably a lot of people shaking their heads up and down saying, yeah, I know. I know. I've had customers play the mom and dad game and say, yeah, the sales guy said I could have it. And having a seamless system like CoConstruct is a great system where all the communication happens inside the platform. There's not all this one-off type stuff. So if you're a home builder, a remodeler, if you're doing light commercial, I would encourage you to look for a system like CoConstruct. If you're a smaller builder, if you're doing work at a larger scale, commercial work, say, look at Procore. If you want some more information, contact me. I'll have some information at the end. But you need to have a system. It's amazing. Some people say, I can't afford a system like that. But if you think about all the problems that are being caused by this poor communication and all the money and frustration and lost time because of poor communication, it really makes a good communication system like this an absolute no-brainer. So great advice. Training. It's a huge topic. I just want to give it a glancing blow, but if a business owner is planning on setting up a training program, what is the most important thing that they need to focus on first?
This one's going to be controversial for sure. As I was the director of training and development in my last position, I was very hyper-focused on creating a really great cultural base, which I believe comes from, there's many different components, of course, in creating a great culture in a company, but training is one of them. And I really wanted to bring in a lot of that great training, like 7 Habits and Where's My Cheese, and all of these different really wonderful tools that are going to help people to be better managers, to be better at the customer experience, to be better at human-to-human connection, to be better at building trust within a team, change management, all of these huge things that are big parts of our companies. If we don't build that into a training program and are very intentional about creating that in our culture, it will happen. But then you're going to have something that isn't what you ever intended it to be. So I think that is just as important as the technical training that you're going to have in a training program. Of course, we have to build homes, and we have to build them efficiently and with quality and on time. That's what we do, right? So that technical training and having really, really clear processes and procedures in place, and everybody knows exactly what those are, that is so important. But just as equally important are some of these other components that help people know how to relate with one another. So I get, and I actually had some of the struggles in that position because I was very focused on wanting to get some of this more human stuff out there, knowing that we had the technical stuff with it. I wanted to marry the two, and a lot of the messages I was getting was, well, let's just do the technical first, and when we get that to a point, then we'll work on the other. But you're never really going to get that to a point if you're catching what I'm saying. That you're always going to be massaging that and making it a little bit better, especially as our techniques of building and as technology continues to enhance and increase. It's going to constantly be changing, and so having that really strong foundation is important.
Good advice. So start with the cultural, how to deal with people, how to deal with customers, how to deal with each other, sort of the operating system level things. That's where you would start?
I would, because what we establish internally is what our customers will experience externally. We can't disconnect those two things. And if we have a weak culture and we have a weak or toxic environment or just a dysfunctional environment internally, whether or not your customers ever really see that, there's a lot of energy built up in that, and they can feel it. And it will automatically create a situation that's not going to be super positive for anyone involved. And it's going to affect your reputation. It's going to affect your bottom line, really, which is what most people are really focused on in business. So it's finding a way to incorporate both of those things into your training and into your culture.
What's an example of a situation where your customers will feel that negativity?
Let's actually go back to that kind of mom and dad playing the different parent situation, right? This often happens. It's not uncommon where a salesperson is the main point of contact for your customer, and then you have your superintendent who's building the home. And sometimes there's a disconnect between them in their communication. And quite frankly, sometimes there's a little bit of friction between those two departments. There can be quite often, because one side is trying to sell something, and they will often try to do whatever they possibly can to get that sale. Right now, we have an environment that is not very much that way, right? We're kind of taking orders, which is awesome. I'm glad that that's what our industry is facing right now. But in times where it gets a little more thin, we really have to sell. And that's where sometimes that friction can enhance and increase between those two, is because our salespeople have got to sell homes, or we don't have jobs, we don't have a company. And yet our construction managers, it's very difficult for them to build a custom home if that is not what your offer is. And so when those two parties in the team do not connect well, our customers can feel that, right? They can feel it. Even if you force that grin when you're meeting with each other in front of the customer, oh my goodness, energy is a huge thing. People can really feel it. And it doesn't feel great when you have two parents that are fighting, if you will. So having a strong team connection is so important and so valuable. And going back to, you mentioned some systems, and of course there's really great software and a lot of fantastic companies that can help us to have those systems, to have processes and procedures in place. But having a very clear communication system is really, really important. Having regular weekly team meetings where the team on site is discussing everything that's going on. They're discussing current issues on the job site. They're discussing every single homeowner, regardless of the stage of construction. So everybody's on the same page as to what Mr. and Mrs. Jones were upset about this week, or Mr. and Mrs. Jones loved their pre-construction walkthrough. They were so happy with Bob the Builder. And, you're just reporting everything that's going on with the whole team, so everyone's on the same page. And then if there's an issue that requires additional input from leadership, that information is communicated up to the leadership team, who can then discuss it and get an answer back quickly. It's when those communication routes are broken down, or there is not a clear communication route, that's when things start to fail. The customer certainly feels it and they experience it. So clear communication in those processes and procedures, and having a strong team foundation is really key.
Good advice. All right. I want to camp out on this for a minute. I found that there's this tension. Hopefully it can be a healthy tension between different groups. involved with the project: sales, salesperson, and superintendent, estimating, construction, accounting, operations. Anytime we have different departments that have competing interests, like business development, they want to keep the customer happy, give them whatever they want. On the operations side, it's all about delivering it and making money. There's some healthy tension there, and it should be healthy, but there's definitely tension because we have opposing goals. We have opposing deliverables. So what can people do to eliminate that negativity, still keep that healthy tension, but have a good culture where there's not that eye rolling, the forced smile when they have to, the superintendent has to stand by the salesperson, and the negative energy. What can somebody do to create a good, healthy culture where people work together even when there's healthy tension?
One of my favorite leadership books is The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. In that, he talks a lot about how when we have a high trust culture, work is completed a lot more quickly, and we are not spending nearly as much money. And you know what that looks like. You know the people in the past that you've worked with, that you just trust them no matter what. You don't have to double check everything. You don't have to reread the email 18 times. You don't have to wonder if it's going to be misinterpreted and misread. That speeds things up so much more quickly than if there's a low trust culture, right? You kind of want to look at it like a bank account. And we're constantly either depositing into a trust account or we're pulling from it. And that's normal. Like, we're going to have moments where we are actually pulling from that trust account. But if there's a greater amount of trust there than not, then that relationship continues to be a healthy one. So I believe trust is, so at Leaders Voice at my company, I focus on 5 components of leadership. And really briefly, I can certainly explain more of this, and it'll be on my website very soon. But the 5 components are love, connection, expansion, adventure, and experience. Now, regardless of if you agree with those components or other characteristics of leadership, I would argue very, very much, very strongly that at the base, at the foundation of all leadership is trust. If you can help another person to feel seen and to be safe, you're winning at leadership. And that is, every single one of us is a leader, right? If we influence even one other person, we're a leader. And so regardless of whether or not we lead a team, we are leaders. And it really comes down to that basic human connection. If we can establish trust with another human, let them feel seen and feel safe with us, you eliminate so many problems. And if there's been a situation where trust has already, maybe you started out at a low level of trust, or you came into a situation where there wasn't a great amount of trust going on, it can always be reestablished. I think sometimes we get really caught up in situations, scenarios, titles, biases, all kinds of different things. But if we just simply hone it down to the fact that we are humans, and I'm having a conversation with another human, and I want to build trust with this human. I want to do so with empathy and understanding. If we can do that and approach it from that place, which is why love is one of my components. I know that's a funky word. People don't like to say it in business, but it certainly has its place. That's showing up in a place of love for another human. And if we can do that and build those relationships of trust with humans, it alleviates so much of that.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I've worked in very low trust environments, and I've been in a couple of really high trust environments. And it's amazing how many problems go away in a high trust environment. It eliminates so much bureaucracy and second guessing, and it's just so much more fun and enjoyable to work in a high trust environment. And I think I found that trust is one of the biggest motivators of people. When I feel trusted by a client or by my manager, I'm going to go through walls to do what's right, to take care of them, because I love autonomy and I love to be trusted. That's in my experience, it's one of the biggest motivators. So when you extend trust to people, as a leader, it's your job to extend trust to people. If you keep doing that, you'll be amazed at what they can do. So fantastic stuff. I know we could talk for a long time, but I want to be cognizant and be a good steward of your time. So you're going to be at the Women in Residential Construction Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, September 25th through the 27th. If people want to connect with you and they're like, I like what Leyah has to say, I need to find out more about what she's up to. If they can't make it to Scottsdale, where can they go to connect with you?
A couple of different places. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. And then I do have my website. My website is leadersvoice.co. And then my name, I'm assuming, hopefully will be in the notes because it's spelled a little funny. My name is Leyah Valgardson. And again, you can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram, and would love to connect with anyone. I always will offer discovery calls, complimentary, and just love to jump on and chat with you through some of the questions or challenges that you have, and would be happy to talk with anyone. So please reach out.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has been extremely helpful. I love talking about this stuff, and this is really where the game is won or lost, folks. So take this advice to heart. Go wrestle some porcupines, get uncomfortable, change your mindset, all of that good stuff. There's a lot of work to be done from this podcast. So thank you so much, Leyah.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate you having me on.
Good stuff. All right, make sure and connect with Leyah. Go to leadersvoice.co. Look her up on Instagram. If you're not sure how to spell her name or where the links are, then open up the podcast player that you're listening to this podcast on. There are some show notes there. I'll have the links. I'll also have all the other stuff that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. But check this out. Put this stuff into practice. And if you are a woman in residential construction and you're anywhere near the West Coast, you should really check out the Women in Residential Construction Conference that is coming up September 25th through the 27th. You'll get an opportunity to hear more from Leyah and then also interact with what I assume is a fantastic group of women leaders in the residential construction industry. As always, I appreciate the ratings and the reviews. If you could take a couple of minutes and do me a big favor and do two things for me. If you could open up iTunes, open up your podcast player, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is that you're listening to this podcast on, and leave a review. That helps get the word out there to the interwebs. And if you could also share this podcast with somebody that you think would get some benefit out of it, send them a text, send them an email. Hey, you need to check out the Construction Leading Edge podcast. I think you'll like it. That would be fantastic. And as always, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.